Hello everyone, it's time to review the results for the 3-card blind main event tournament for February. Yet again, we are breaking records for growth in this community. There were 149 players who participated this month, and 54 of those players were new players. So if you're watching this video and you're a new player, thanks for giving the tournament a try, and I hope to see you again next month. In previous Meta Snapshot videos, I've been giving a diversity score based off of the number of distinct decks submitted by players, which in this month was 126 distinct decks, over the total number of players of 149, would get us a diversity score of 84.56%. That being said, I want to take you down the nerdy rabbit hole of statistics for a minute and explore why the diversity score that I've been sharing in the past isn't as effective as other statistics. Let's imagine a tournament that had only 10 players. I might share a statistic with you saying that there were 5 distinct decks across 10 players and give you a score of 50%. But that doesn't reveal all of the information that you might care about when looking at meta diversity. We could imagine that each of those 5 decks was equally represented with 2 players playing that deck. Or we can imagine a scenario where there's one deck that has 6 players playing it, and the remaining 4 decks only have 1 player playing it. I think most people would agree that the first scenario, where the decks are equally distributed across players, is a more diverse meta than the second scenario, where one deck is highly overrepresented. We can also imagine that these 5 decks could be entirely distinct with no shared cards between them, or they could share the same card across each of the lists because there might be an extremely powerful core component that supports all of those decks. For that reason, I'm going to be changing how I present that diversity statistic moving forward. Instead of looking at decks, I will be looking at cards and how frequently they are played. In addition to that, I will be relying on something called the Simpsons Index, which comes from the field of ecology. The Simpsons Index is intended to measure how diverse an ecosystem is in terms of what species populate that ecosystem. Without going too deep into the math behind this, in the context of 3-card blind, what the Simpsons Index is you can imagine all of the players participating in the tournament put their decks into one big pile and shuffle them up. The Simpsons Index is the probability that you draw 2 cards from the deck and they are different cards. There is an additional layer to this, however. We could put all of the cards in one pile regardless of how they performed, but the point of the diversity score is to try to uncover whether the meta is healthy. And whether the meta is healthy or not is not dependent on the variety of cards that were played. It depends on the variety of cards that were viable. For that reason, instead of just making a pile of all the cards, instead, a card will be added to the pile for each win it has gotten, and half of a card for each tie it has gotten. The last thing I'd like to consider here is that the diversity score should help inform the community whether more dramatic bans need to be taken to help adjust the meta. For that reason, instead of presenting to you the raw probability score from the Simpsons Index, I will instead be presenting you with a grade to help showcase how diverse the format actually is with regards to how diverse we would like it to be. Based on the Simpsons Index, a healthy meta, in my opinion, is one where there is at least a 96% chance that the 2 cards that you draw from the pile do not match. So to wrap up this math conversation here, the Simpsons Index for February was a 98.6%, which means that there was a 98.6% chance that if you drew 2 cards from the pile, those 2 cards would be different from each other. The 3-card blind diversity grade for the month is the Simpsons Index minus 90% times 10. So we get an 86 for the 3-card blind diversity grade, which converts to a B. To put things into perspective, in January, the 3-card blind diversity grade would be an 89 or a B+. So this month was a little less diverse, but not concerningly so. Alright, I apologize for the unsolicited statistics lesson. Let's go into talking about some magic. The entire reason this conversation came up is because Crashing Footfalls had such a huge impact on the meta this month that it had many players very concerned about the health and diversity of the meta. Not only was Crashing Footfalls the most popular card in the month, but it also performed very well, and in particular had an extremely high density in Group C, where 5 players were on the exact same deck. Crashing Footfalls, Pick Your Poison, and Forest. Pick Your Poison also leads us into our next point of discussion, which is examining Leyline of the Guild Pact. The Leyline of the Guild Pact Scion of Draco Ancient Tomb deck was one of the ones that I was most excited to see perform in February. I do think that this deck has the potential to do well in future months, but this month it was overwhelmed by so many people that came prepared to hate it out. With all that having been covered, let's jump into looking at our winning decks. Ordinarily, I'd go through the decks one by one, but in this case, this month was so dominated by one strategy that frankly, it's going to be easiest just to cover a lot of these all at once. Alright, I'm gonna rattle these off because these lists are incredibly similar to each other. In Group F, our winner was Special K. In Group E, our winner was Tyronium. And in Group A, our winners, tied, were Icorn and Jamboree. All 4 of these decks were some variation of Crashing Footfalls, Piracy or Funeral Charm, and a land. We've already known from months prior that combining a 1-drop with Funeral Charm or Piracy Charm can be extremely powerful, but this month really pulled back the veil on just how powerful these decks can be. Not only did this strategy win 3 out of the 6 pods, but it also proved to be incredibly difficult to actually beat this deck at all levels of play. As a matter of fact, in Group A, Icorn and Jamboree only had 2 losses each. It's very rare that we can say something like this with such a high level of certainty, but it's undeniable that this was the best strategy in February. Let's take a second to go back and cover the other groups though. In Group D, our winner was Big Greasy, who was playing Inkmoth Nexus, Mox Pearl, and Skrelv's Hive. Skrelv's Hive is a card that we've known has been very powerful for some time now, but what's special about Big Greasy's list is that combining it with Mox Pearl and Inkmoth Nexus lets you get a turn 1 Skrelv's Hive while also giving you a secondary threat to push even more poison counters onto your opponent. In Group C, our winner was FC Wombat, who was playing Force of Despair, Memnite, and Unmask. This is a very interactive, controlling style of deck list that we have seen before, and it managed to rise above all of the copies of Crashing Footfall that were in the same pod as it. And finally, in Group B, we have Duder 611, who was playing Cathedral of War, Inkmoth Nexus, and the Filigree Silex. Another tried and tested strategy that combines a fast, infect, nearly unblockable creature with a piece of removal that can hit essentially any card in the game. And with that, I'd like to congratulate our winners one more time before we move on to discussing which cards will be part of the community ban vote for this month. I'd also like to offer a special congratulations to Icorn, who just claimed the champion position on the lifetime leaderboard with an 1842 ELO rating. As a reminder, the cards included in this list are the ones that you will be able to vote on whether you'd like to see them remain legal in the format or be added to the ban list. If you're watching this video around the time it has been uploaded, that vote will be running right now, and there will be a link in the description for you to visit the website and cast your votes. Up first on the list is Crashing Footfalls, which had an average score of 66% and a meta share of 14.16%, making it the most popular card this month. Frankly, this entire video has felt like it's been about Crashing Footfalls, so I'll let you come to your own conclusions as to why this card is included on the ban vote. Next on the list, we are bundling Piracy Charm and Funeral Charm into one part of the vote, so if one of them gets banned, so does the other. As far as the format is concerned, these are basically the same card, so I think it is more appropriate to think of them as having a combined meta share of 6.72% instead of looking at their 2 meta shares in isolation. The flexibility of being able to force a player to discard a card at instant speed or kill a creature that has 1 toughness makes this card incredibly strong against a huge number of decks. Next on the list we have Inkmoth Nexus, which had a 63% average score and a 4% meta share. This card has been a strong format staple for some time now, making its appearance regularly at high elo, and if it gets added to the banned list, players will still be able to play with the slightly less aggressive man lands like Mutavault or Mishra's Factory. Following this, we have Chronomaton, which had an average score of 55% and a meta share of 4.73%. This card is being featured on the ban vote once again because of how ubiquitous it is and how big a role it plays in defining what other cards are viable. Chronomaton poses a significant obstacle to other 1-cost threats from being viable in the format because often they just get blatantly outperformed by Chronomaton, which is reliable in most types of matchups. I think it's also worth noting that the existence of Chronomaton is what drives a lot of types of removal to be included in decks. For example, Funeral Charm and Piracy Charm both are extremely powerful in part because they can kill Chronomaton, which is almost certainly going to be present in any meta where it is legal. And for those reasons, although it didn't perform quite as well as Chronomaton itself, we'll be including Sen's Tactician as the final card that will be part of the ban vote for this month. If you haven't already, consider joining the Discord to receive timely updates as the ban vote rolls out, so you can learn which cards were banned as soon as that information becomes available. With that, I'd like to thank all of you who chose to participate in the main event tournament for February, and regardless of whether you participated or not, thanks for watching, and see you soon.